the impact this has on the hardware. It's actually the second, well, probably the first, the most important problem about the design of any kind of space system. The second one being the cost of the launch. But that's going to be what explains the cost of any kind of system that we produce for satellites. Okay. What is this shit? I didn't have that in mind. It's bizarre. It's probably the conversion from page to photo. Just okay. So we'll go through the bunch of definitions. What are the effects and what we do to mitigate these effects? And then we'll talk also briefly about two related subjects. The debris, you've probably seen or heard a lot about that. If you've seen a recent movie, Gravity, probably rings a bell. Have you seen this movie?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
Boring.
Boring?
It was boring because nothing happened.
But did you think it was from the technical point of view? Did you think it was techno bullshit? Can I say so?
I would say it was realistic.
Okay. What did you think?
I saw the first tribute movie.
Sorry? You think it was what?
With a 3D effect, it was so brilliant.
Do you think it's real rubbish, or do you think it's like I put it here? Sorry, I should really try to get the names right. Oh shit, Dave. Okay, I got it right. Yeah. Do you think that Dave it was kind of realistic? The consensus is it's
Yep.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it is pretty realistic what they describe. It's pretty close to. They must have had some reasonably good advisor to tell them how it works and what's happening. Yeah.
I like the Interstellar better.
Sorry?
I like Interstellar better.
The what? Sorry?
Interstellar.
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 Ah, yeah.
That's a problem.
Interstellar. That's dark, more dark. If I remember.
Yeah.
Black hole.
Dark. Yeah.
Science fiction.
And then, last but we'll talk a little bit about microgravity very briefly. So, a few definitions. Space, it's the region beyond the Earth's atmosphere, nothing fancy. So, beyond what we call the upper atmosphere, which is the kind of border between the real vacuum and the Earth. Then in space you have what we call the ionosphere. Anybody has heard about ionosphere? Yeah. Good. So what do you think protects us from cosmic radiation?
The magnetic field of the Earth.
I should go. I have nothing to teach you. You know everything, guys. You know everything. Dave knows everything.
It's Dave's no everything.
Don't have a drink. Great. Yeah, I mean, it's not the atmosphere. It's really the magnetic shield of the Earth and not the Sun as well, if I remember correctly. The Sun has something to do with that. But mostly it's the Earth, vanillin belts and all that. Yeah, vanillin radiation belts. that's an interesting region, but it's bad for us because when you cross that, you have a lot of particles which have been deflected, which are trapped in there, so you have more particles there, and they have the potential to do some nasty things to your electronics. Okay, then the magnetosphere, that's basically, yeah, what kind of they was mentioning, so it's the called the double dipole, so the dipole that's creating this magnetic field, which is shielding us, but in some region, some of these particles are trapped, and thus, when you cross these regions, you have a lot of reasonable energy particles that can interact with your electronics. Have you heard of a recent constellation that is sitting very, very close to these magnetic belts? It's around 8,000 kilometers, if I remember correctly, altitude. Have you heard of O3b? This constellation is really into this region, and it's bad for the electronics. And we are starting to see the effects of that. You have probably heard as well about space weather. The sun has a kind of cyclical activity, and the people who work in space, they follow that. Well, usually there is no real effect on the hardware, except from time to time transient memory flips, these sort of things that may happen from time to time. That means the design is good because it enables the satellite to survive these, not only the regular field of particles, but also the small bumps that we get from time to time. I think the cycle is from memory, I don't remember. I think you have these sort of things like every decade or so, if I remember correctly. Something, when you have sun eruptions, these sort of things, and it happens sort of, a few times per century, maybe a decade or something like that. Solar flares, these sort of things. So these radiations, there are two things. It's both electromagnetic and particles. You've probably heard in some fancy course, I will not go upon that. That's way beyond my level, and way beyond anything I've been using in my work. It's relativity and things like that, the duality between particle and electromagnetic waves. I have never used that, to be honest, in my life. I have always been able to explain all the things I've manipulated using standard mechanics. Doesn't mean you will not have to, but by and large, I have never been into this area of quantum physics, relativity, all these things. So I will not talk about that. Definition of radiation. Radiation, for me, there are electromagnetic waves and particles. Electromagnetic wave, as you know, going from the light to the much shorter wavelengths. No, much longer wavelength. Sorry. Much longer wavelength that we use for communication. And particles, usual particles, electron, photon, and sometimes I was surprised to see that you even have real elements. I mean, like copper, whatever, iron. You have real atoms. Another thing we're going to is the outgassing. Outgassing means when you go to the vacuum, the particles, the bits of gas that are trapped into the material, they get released, or they get absorbed, or they get or they freeze. That's a phenomenon that can cause some trouble. We don't talk about that. So let's talk about now the effects of all this. In a nutshell, the radiation, they interact mostly, as you know, with electronic circuits, causing what kind of thing? Have you heard about SEU, single event upset, already in your life? Single event upset rings a bell? No?
Mm-hmm.
It's basically when you have a memory or a latch that changes status. When you have a memory that changes from a single cell that changes from 1 to 0, vice versa, or an electronic element that's supposed to be in one or the other position that changes position for no reason. That's usually, in these cases, we say it's a single event upset. So it's one of the effects of a radiation hitting this part of the electronic circuit. Outgassing, what does it do? Mostly, nothing on the electronics there for outgassing. It's mostly what you call contamination. So basically, it affects the optical elements of a satellite. That's mostly important for scientific satellites. Or it could be also an issue for sensors, and attitude sensors on the satellite. But by and large, the worst effects are related to mirrors, to lenses, to things like that, things that you want to keep very, very pure. So, for instance, if you have a satellite that's supposed to observe the stars with a very, 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 very fine granularity, and that uses optical elements with very, very high accuracy and using optics, then that's where outgassing can pose a problem. Also, I was almost forgetting that it can have an adverse effect on thermal radiation, because on thermal radiators, because we talk about that when we talk about the thermal subsystem. usually you have, you have to use radiators because otherwise, most of the time, because you don't have any convection. We'll talk about that, the difference between when you're in the air and when you're not in the air. Thermal-wise, it's reasonably easy to understand. Go ahead.
I had a question on outgassing. So I'm
Yeah.
guessing the gas that is being released from a planetary body,
Sorry?
from a body in space.
It's gas that's released on the. It's things that happen right from the launch. It starts to happen when you get to very low pressure atmosphere. So right when you start to be around, let's say 100, 200 kilometers, that's when it starts, this sort of effects, because the pressure is getting really low. And what you really want to avoid is this kind of effects, so basically contamination, and stuff like that. It's all these sort of things that you have not properly taken care of, some impurities. That's one of the reasons why when you, we'll talk about that a bit later, when you put together the satellite, you do it in a clean room, basically. So you drainage any kind of impurities, any kind of things like that. Have you ever seen a clean room? Or
Pictures, yeah.
On the
Pictures, yeah.
On the pictures, yes.
do you know how it works, more or less?
I've worked with it actually.
So you know how it works, basically.
Yeah.
So it's kind of airtight, more or less. And basically, the air is filtered and it's overpressure. So when you open the door, basically it goes out. So it prevents any kind of impurities to go inside. And you have different classes of clean room. And usually the highest class, highest or lowest? I think it's the number, the smaller the number, the more pure it is, basically, if I remember correctly. Because when you have a very high class of protection, you use that for this kind of sensitive things, so for optical mirrors, so it need to be really pure. So that basically that's one of the reasons why we use this protective measure to make sure that there is no contamination on solar cells as well. Solar cells, you can have this problem. We have other problems on the solar cells with time. We'll talk about that as well. Then, another. So that was for outgassing. Light and thermal radiation. As you know, the effect of the light is just like on the Earth. It creates an aging process of the material. If you have a car, the worst thing you can do is park your car in the sun. You're much better off in the shadow. A lot of things age with the sunlight. All the plastics, all the things. In vacuum, it gets much worse, much faster. This kind of aging process. We've talked about the effect on the orbit, which is also caused by the flux of photons from the sun. Basically. No question? Move to the next. It's just, definition. Oh, shit. Oh, what is that stuff? What is this? What is this stuff? What's happening? That's weird. There's something happening there. But anyway. So, now we'll talk briefly about what we do about that. What do we do about radiations? There's two kinds of protection against radiation. that I know of. One is very much like, how shall I say, kind of sledgehammer approach, whereby you have, you are protecting your circuits with a layer of material, of usually of metal, that's going to block the incoming particles. The problem is it's heavy, of course. The other more intricate solution.
Can you just make it full screen? It's difficult to see from here.
Sorry. Yeah. I'll go back to that. There's something bizarre that happened. It created a lot of blank pages. I don't know. Could be from sorry. Yes. Okay then.
Yes, thank you.
A more common protection that I know of, and I've seen a long time ago, is software protection. So basically, this kind of protection is well known to protect you against transient events, like what I was talking about before, when a bit flips or a latching element changes status. Usually, to protect against that, we have what is called a watchdog. You have heard about the term watchdog? It's into, I mean, I think it's also part of terrestrial technology. It's basically a background task by the processor that's supposed to reset from time to time an independent counter. And if your processor gets lost in something, basically, so if it's, because the assumption is that when you have a malfunction in your processor, the processor may go into a loop that takes all its computing energy, sort of. So it's computing like crazy on this task. In this case, it will not be able to perform this background independent task, which is to reset this independent counter. And usually this counter, if it goes to this maximum value and then it laps, then in the software there's a branch that copies all the program to run, basically. So it's like restarting your computer from its original state, basically. Or how do you call that now? Yeah, reset all the values or whatever. That's physically how it would work. So outgassing, what do we do to avoid the outgassing? So it's two kinds of things. It's usually material related. So you have a list of material. NASA is issuing this kind of list. I think ESA has also this sort of list of materials that you should not use. Moisture, sealants, lubricants, adhesive, but also some metals, some glasses. So because some of these materials are known to trap gas and then release them when you go into very low pressure and vacuum. Outgassing, you also have a specific manufacturing process that can be used. For instance, in metallurgy, to avoid cracks in the metal, and of course these cracks could trap impurities that could then be outgassed. Mitigation, I also thought about the solar cell, sorry. There's two kinds of mitigation technique in the design itself of the cells. Usually on most of the satellites I've seen, you have it's a bit like on the cars now. On the cars you have the same kind of design. Have you seen the way the batteries on cars are arranged? It's there's two things you do. There's two things you want to do in this kind of arrangement, just like on the solar cell and on the battery. You want to have a certain way, a certain level of current, a certain voltage that you, and that's how you connect them together, but also the way these cells are connected together, and that's true for the cells, the solar cells. You want to avoid failure propagation in the way they are connected. And that's purely the design of the solar cells. But also, one of the things that you may have seen or heard is the gradual decay of typical solar cells with time. I don't know if you are familiar with this kind of. Where is my pen?
This is in the sense that, like, when you design.
Sorry?
This is in the sense that when you design a satellite, the solar cells, they need like capacity above the what's needed. So if it increases,
exactly. That's what I mean. Because you know, for instance, in a geo, if I remember correctly, you're going to have this kind of. So you do that because basically you get further. Why does it do that? Why do you have this kind of shape? Sorry, it's bad now. Let me do another one. Or better. Let's try Google for it. Nice picture. I'm very bad at pictures, sorry. Try this. And I will ask you if you can. If you can find an explanation to that. Google for that. Sorry about that. We'll try something. So why do we do that kind of? Why do we have this kind of behavior? For if you monitor the cell current with time, why do we have this behavior? Why does it go down? Easy question.
That is are we talking about cell capacity?
Sorry?
This is the capacity of solar.
No, it's a total. When you have your wheel, it's a total current that you can measure on your
On the y-axis, we have current.
Yes. No. Yes. Yes. Yes.
What is the question again?
Why do we have this kind of behavior?
But after a while, their performance, their efficiency will decrease.
Yes. There's two very easy answers. Go ahead.
On one way, I would say the performance is getting worse because of the wear, and on the other side, the cells are getting dirty.
Kind of. You're close. So yeah, it's not really wear, but it's kind of getting dirty. It's basically mostly one way of looking at it is the obscuration of the cover, which is on top of the cell. And you have no choice, because if you have no cover, it's worse, and then your cell can be even more damaged. So it's kind of protective, transparent cover, and this cover will get, with time, its transparent properties will get a bit worse. The second thing I wanted you to tell me about this is very simple. It's just the fact that when that was referring to geo. The fact that when you're a geo, you're like where the Earth is compared to the Sun, and the fact that the Sun does not, the Earth does not rotate in a circular motion around the Sun. It's an ellipse. So you have at a certain time you are closer to the Sun, and at a certain time you are further from the Sun. As it happens, it's kind of mitigating for the northern hemisphere, because we are closer to the Sun in winter than we are in summer.
No, so basically, there are two trends in this plot. One trend is the waviness that we say.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to say about basically the elliptical orbit of the Earth around the Sun. Because even your geo is fairly close to the Earth compared to the distance to the Sun. It's probably a ratio.
So basically, can we say like one complete waveform is basically 1 year?
1 year, exactly.
1 year.
Exactly. Yeah. And the rate of decay is pretty slow, luckily. It's pretty slow. It's of the order of percent per year. Less than 1%, if I remember correctly. So it's reasonably stable. But still, as you said, I think you have to oversize your capacity for the lifetime duration. And that's as simple as that. Because you know it's going to go down with time. Okay, so sorry, I didn't find the right curve I wanted. So this, we've been through that. So we've been through this one. You had a question?
I had a query, I asked him.
Go ahead.
No, it's clear now.
Okay. Now, a little bit about the debris. If you've seen this movie, it's very, very, very realistic, I think. Definition of debris, it's any non-controlled object around the Earth. At the end of the day, most fall back. They are mostly burnt up. And what's left over usually is harmless. Sometimes some objects have been known to fall somewhere in Russia or somewhere like that, around Russia, if I remember. But the reason why it's usually harmless is that simply because the Earth is mostly covered with water, and then you don't hear about it. The size go from tiny bits of paint to complete space station or the likes. Who's doing the tracking? To my knowledge, until recently, only the Americans were doing a complete tracking of that. There's a lot of talk about space situation awareness. I'm not sure it includes this aspect. I think the Europeans are trying to.
Even India has started the cell for the same. Even India has started the cell for SSA, that is to track debris and other objects. It has been recently started, some maybe 2 months.
Okay. I mean, until recently, to my knowledge, I think it was mostly NORAD who was doing a regular follow-up of everything. And this is usually, I have in mind something like 10 centimeters, but I think it's a bit low. But for sure, they cannot track anything below 10 centimeters.
I think we can detect till 1 centimeter, but the orbital dynamics of anything below 10 centimeter is not very predictable.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So we cannot.
But I'm not even sure we can detect the one between 1 and 10 centimeters. It sounds to me difficult. Maybe it's the state of the art has improved, but it sounds very, very quasi-science fiction to me. But maybe they're doing better now. What I've seen recently is that they have been doing some statistical impact. Well, that was some time ago, from the shuttle flights. So basically, they looked at all the impacts of the shuttle when it was coming back, and they inferred from that statistical assessment of the number of particles in these regions. And this statistical assessment was leading to about 100,000 of such smaller pieces between 1 and 10 centimeters. So it's kind of a combinatory explosion. The more you go down in size, the more you have. And you've probably all heard about the Kessler syndrome. If anybody has not, you have not, and I will talk briefly about that. The Kessler syndrome is when you have a sufficient number of particles in space around the Earth. We're always talking about around the Earth, the vicinity. I'm not sure what kind of limit we could put to that, but I would say on the top of my head, a few hundred kilometers altitude, maybe up to a couple of thousands. So when you have reach this critical mass of debris, that from this point onwards, you get a kind of chain reaction. So these debris will unavoidably create other debris. If you think about it from the point of view of flight dynamics, it's reasonably easy to figure it out. First, because these particles, you have to know that, to realize that they, by definition, they have a very, very high velocity, each of them. Why? Because if they did not have this velocity, they would be falling down straight to the Earth. So if they are circling around the Earth, it means that by definition, they are of the order of, I would say on the top of my head, 7 to 12 kilometers per second. In, I would say, a velocity which is quasi-perpendicular to the radius from the particle to the Earth. So you can imagine that each of these particles with this kind of velocity, and of course, by the way, these velocities are not correlated, so in a given plane at a given altitude, a pair of particles may have, or will have, velocity of directions which are, we're talking about the order of 10 kilometers per second. That's the order of magnitude. Yeah. So from 7 to, I'd say 11, 12, this sort of range. So these particles, if they collide with each other, there is a lot of energy that will be dissipated, and they will break into smaller amount of particles. As a result of a collision, you can imagine that the resulting particles will be flying in all directions. So some of them will directly fall back, but others will have an orbit which is similar to the ones they were originating from. So you can very easily imagine that any collision will generate many, many more particles in terms of number. Maybe they will be smaller, but there will be a much higher number, because only a small proportion will fall back as a result, and most of them will remain. And that's what we call the Kessler syndrome. So basically, more collisions, more particles created. So once you have a certain density into an area, then you're going to have more and more collision. That's the scary scenario, because this makes some regions of the space very, very, at first very dangerous to use, and later completely impossible to use. I mean, above a certain level, anyone would be foolish to cross that with any vehicle. So that's the sad part of this, and even more sad, there is no realistic way to clean up, unless you've heard something that I haven't heard a lot. But all these theories about nets and things like that, I cannot really believe that it's likely to do anything meaningful. Sorry. Anybody has heard anything about the cleanup attempt? I know ESA has done a lot of things. Have you guys heard about the concept of demisable, I think it's called demisable satellites? Does it ring a bell? What do you think it means? Any idea?
At the end of its, maybe the satellite at the end of its life, I don't know, it maybe pushes, it tries to enter the Earth's atmosphere again.
Sorry?
Does it enter the Earth's atmosphere after the end of its life?
Kind of, yeah, kind of. Go ahead. You're close, getting close.
So that it can burn and there's no debris left.
Exactly. It's equivalent of, the plastic bags that you replace with paper, and then they get into small fragments. Biodegradable, exactly. It's the satellite equivalent of biodegradable. It's a very recently I've seen a few research topics on that into the ESA studies. But that's only true, of course, for LEOs. I'm not sure. I probably put that into my. Yeah, okay, I'll put that here. Next slide now. So, yeah, integration techniques on debris. I have not heard anything really meaningful on that. I've seen artists' views of nets and things like that. I know the Japanese have had some ideas about that, but it's difficult to imagine something that can do the job. Magnetic, not all the objects are magnetized. A laser that would break the stuff into smaller particles. It's probably as dangerous as effective because you would create a higher number of particles. I'm not sure having very, very small particles is any solution because you would have to break them down to very, 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 very small particles, because don't forget that we'll have an exercise about that, by the way, to show you the potential damaging effect of say a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter cube of aluminium, how it compares to, for instance, a truck entering a brick wall, and what kind of velocity the truck entering a brick wall is equivalent to compared to your 2 or 1 or 2 centimeter particle aluminium tube. What sort of mitigation techniques we have? We've been having a lot of regulation for the geo, for instance. For the geo, it's been mandatory for a while now that the geo, once its lifetime is complete, the geo goes to a kind of graveyard orbit. The graveyard orbit, if I remember correctly, is above geo, as it should be. I don't remember exactly how many kilometers. But for geo and also for other kind of vehicles, you also have to, in addition to the deorbiting, you also have to perform a certain amount of task, including. Sorry, you have a question?
I know.
Good. No? So, including the passivation. You familiar with what passivation may mean? That's basically to prevent any kind of explosion. So passivation includes opening the valves and removing the fuel, and removing even the pressure. We'll see, we'll talk about that later, but in the attitude orbit control system, you have fuel oxidizers. If it's be liquid, you may have single stage or single stuff that you have. Monoprop. Thank you. Monoprop. That's all. Monoprop, or you can have bipropellant. And in both cases, you have a gas that's pressurizing the fuel or the oxidizer or the monoprop. And in this case, you want to really deplete everything, including the pressure. At the end of this passivation, close to the end, you inhibit what is sometimes in the satellite, which is the pyrotechnic actuator. You have also, maybe, do you see what that means? The pyro device? Have you heard of that? Pyrotechnic device is a kind of fireworks stuff. You know fireworks?
Mm-hmm.
It's a small charge, like the powder that you use in gunpowder, and then
So,
it's used to. Sorry.
more like self-contained explosion.
Yeah, I mean, a small explosion. You generate with some current. You generate a spark with an explosion, and in turn that's used to cut a wire or something like that to free up a spring or something like that. That's how you actuate, for instance, deployment of solar panels, deployment of antenna, these sort of things. So these pyro devices are inhibited, and then at the end you completely discharge the battery as well, so that you don't have any remaining energy into the satellite.
So this pyro device inhibition is like a automatic self-destruct.
No. This pyro device inhibition is because you don't want any of these pyrotechnic devices to be commanded again. I think, but to be honest, I'm not really sure that this is needed in any way, because usually, at least the ones that have been known, when you're at the end of life, all the pyro devices have been actuated and they can only be actuated once. So I don't really, I mean, it's just in case you have maybe redundancy or things like that. So I think what they mean here is you want to make sure that they will not burn this kind of powder again in the future. So, but that's it really. And then I think I should have put it at last is you discharge completely the battery, because even the battery, if they are charged, as you know, we've seen on electric cars sometimes, and even on mobile phones. We've heard about these mobile phones burning for no reason. Battery fully charged or partly charged is a potential source of hazard. And then lastly, I mentioned this design rule from for Leo, design for demise, which is, as you said, really the biodegradable equivalent of electronics.
But is it realistic to manufacturing biodegradable?
There's a lot of. I don't know. It started roughly, maybe I would say a couple of years ago, something like that. I've seen a lot of studies about that when I was looking at the ESA call for, I mean, the list of the ESA studies.
It's possible to generate biodegradable electronics, it's just whether or not they're going to be robust enough to go into space.
No, hold on. No. I think that's not what it means. It means basically not biodegradable. It means when they re-enter. I think that story about the demise is really for Leo, because in the last 3, 4, 5 years, there's been a lot of projects that included a fairly high number of Leos. OneWeb and the likes. I mean, you quickly end up. We'll probably talk about that. The lower you go in altitude, the more you need to cover any given region. Because unlike Geo, you cannot say, "Oh, I want to cover this." If you're a Leo, it's very difficult to choose, because you turn around and you don't turn around at the same speed as the Earth to make it short. So you're never in front of the same place. So basically, if you want to cover anywhere, you really need quite a lot. That's in a nutshell the story. So thus, with this large number of satellites, the concern was growing that these would generate a fair amount of debris in the future. And the game is different for LEOs than from GEOs. For GEO, we say, heck, we're never going to get rid of them. There's not so many. Do you know how many GEOs there are around the Earth? Total, order of magnitude wise?
10?
No.
70?
No. We have few hundreds, but it's still not a lot. I mean, you have fewer. You have maybe small triple-digit number of active GEO. I would say on the top of my head, I will research, but I would say on the top of my head, there's probably 400 something. I'd say between 300 and 600 active GEO satellites right now working. And there's not much more, or many more that are in graveyard orbit. So, because for them, the graveyard is, you cannot bring it back. So mandatory is to raise the orbit, to make it, to clear the G-orbit, which is really valuable. The game for the LEO is different. Because for the LEO, it's close to the Earth, and natural thing is to bring it back down to Earth. And in order to minimize the risk of falling it on your house, you have these design rules that it should be. So coming back to this definition of kind of biodegradable, it's not really biodegradable in space. It's the fact that when it burns up, the leftover is small enough that it does not harm us. I think that's what's behind that.
How it burns up? Would it sun flares or something like this?
Sorry?
How we make them to burn?
The more relevant question is, how do we make it not to burn? It's more difficult to make it not to burn and to re-enter without breaking down completely. Because in practice, if you don't do something really with a kind of shield and things like that, most of the thing will burn because it's going to be subject to such high impact when it reaches the higher level or layer of atmosphere, that most of it will be destroyed quite naturally. And then this kind of demise will design, if I understand correctly, because it's a reasonably new subject. Most of this is to make sure that all of it gets burned, basically. But it's not like you want it to naturally get degraded by the solar rays after a while. And that would be kind of counterproductive because you would have flecks of paint and things like that more bigger. What you want is when it goes into the higher atmosphere, it completely, ideally, it completely evaporates and doesn't create a problem. Coming from the constellation that we heard about. Have you guys heard about that in the news recently, this constellation? Because there was a lot. And there was some money on that as well, at least on one web. Have you seen some news on these things?
On what?
Mega constellations for telecommunication.
Yeah, OneWeb. Yeah.
OneWeb for sure.
Starlink. Starlink.
Starlink, I don't know, yeah.
Telesat is there from Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Telesat has been reported to be looking at constellation as well, yeah. But basically that triggered this kind of fear that we would really have a lot of debris, uncontrolled debris in the future. Last, a few words about microgravity. When I was, sorry, go ahead.
I have one question left for the GEO satellites. They go up, LEO goes down, and what is with MEO satellites? Do they just stay there?
I would think that they deorbit as well, but I cannot imagine that they go down. The truth answer is I don't really know if there's any regulation on that. I think there is, but I would imagine that they just raise their orbit like the GEO. Because there is no way they can go down. I mean, like, and then if you don't go down like that, then it takes many decades, centuries to decay naturally and to go down. So forget it. So I would think, I have not seen anything like that about that. I would think that it's like GEO, so you would raise the orbit at the end. But of course that means that you have enough room to do it as well. So
sometimes we try to bring the perigee close to the atmosphere so that, we try to change the orbit so that at least when it crosses, at least for a portion of it, it experiences some drag. Like we try to reduce it below 300.
Yeah. If you have an elliptical orbit,
we make it elliptical after the end of the satellite, so that is one of the mitigation measures. It's up to you whether you are going to implement it or not. But that's probably not if you are at 8,000 or something like that. I would think. No.
Because he's talking about
more than
case in
that.
point is O3b. The O3b we have, that's, if I remember correctly, it's 8,000 or even 8 to 10,000. So there, you would have to have a fairly hefty delta V to bring it back to an elliptical orbit where the perigee is close enough to the Earth, like a few hundred kilometers, so that you have enough deceleration every time you go through the perigee. So I don't imagine that you can play. I mean, I can assume that you have this kind of measure for a few hundreds of kilometers altitude. No, I'm just asking.
For 1,000?
4,000?
Not for till 1,000 kilometers.
4?
No, just one.
1,000. Yeah, okay, 1,000. Yeah,
1,000.
yeah, could be. Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah. But there's also the need to save fuel for that. And usually, so far, fuel was lifetime. So when you have something working, you want to keep it working and generating revenue as much as you can. Well, of course, now I'm already starting to talk about other subject, but this will change a little bit with electric propulsion, as you may have heard, because we will see that the amount of delta V that you can carry on a satellite gets very, 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 very significantly different when you have electric propulsion. We'll talk about that in another module. So, a few words very quickly on microgravity. Microgravity is a subject that that the industry was talking about very long time ago, I would say at least 30 years ago. And I am a bit, and this is not fact, it's opinion, I say clearly, I have not seen a lot of development in this field in the last at least 10 years, 20 years. But honestly, I haven't really been following it very closely. But my opinion is that it's a field that has really not lived up to its promises. I remember in the 80s, there was a lot of research about microgravity applications, so basically how we would be able to perform perfect alloys, so perfect mixing between different materials, that we would be able to have chemical reactions that would not be otherwise possible. For instance, because there is no convection in space, and also in microgravity environment, you could be considering very, very large crystal to grow. But basically, I don't know, have you heard anything concrete in terms of development on microgravity recently? Because frankly, I have not heard much that is really, go ahead.
Yeah, like a couple weeks ago,
Sorry?
I even talked in another class, I was reading about a company that is already having profit, or like, I'm not sure if it was like already having or like planning on it, in manufacturing a special material in microgravity that is only possible there. I don't know if it was like a microfiber, something like this, then they would fabricate there and then send back here, and even this process being costly, they would still make profit because it's really valuable for specific applications. So this is the only thing that I've read so far, which was really interesting for me at the moment because it was the first thing that it came to me this way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and from what I'm reading here, is like Ziblan, the name of the material.
Sorry?
Ziblan, the name of the material, from what I'm, Z-B-L-A-N. It's a type of, yeah, Z-B-L-A-N.
Zeblan.
Yeah,
Okay.
type of optical fiber.
To manufacture optical fiber in microgravity.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean the issue is, yeah, we'll talk about that in a different modules. One of the issues is the cost of basically bringing up something in this environment. It's a horrendous cost at the moment, even though it's been reduced marginally by someone who's been very famous in many circles, who's also making electric cars. But okay, so that concludes this module. So I don't really hear much against this opinion that microgravity is not really a field that has really lived up to its promises. Now, I mean, I think I have completed this module. So any more questions before we start thinking about going to the party, whatever it is, wherever it is, I don't know. There's some kind of do at 6 o'clock, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where is it?
I think it's right in the other building.
Yes,
Yeah.
the other building on the
Main
reception.
building.
We need someone.
Is that on the Kennedy side? Kennedy?
Yeah, the Kennedy building. Yeah.
No, it's
No.
central building.
Is the central
From the main
reception-
entrance, from the central entrance. Yeah.
This one?
But hold on, you said the main entrance. For me, the main entrance was in Kennedy. Is that's another entrance?
That's not the main.
So where is the main
Yeah,
entrance?
it's
Not what you mentioned. Another one from there.
So there's no entrance. I'm interested because I always come through Kennedy, and when I go to the ground floor, the guy never. I mean, I came here this afternoon. The guy did not know anything, and then I had to go to another. To the parking, more or less. And then the guy started to know more or less.
May I explain?
To find
When you're facing the John F. Kennedy building,
yeah.
then you have here the train station.
Oh,
The tram station,
I have a map. I have a map. So, where is the main entrance for you? Because I'm coming through this.
Yeah, here's the tram station.
So we are here.
So here's the
Oh,
John F.
we are here
Kennedy,
now, no?
and this will be the main block.
Yeah.
And here is a red big.
And the main
metal thing.
and for you the main entrance is where?
Here, because we are not here.
We are probably
We
here.
are currently here in Copenhagen.
Oh, here.
So
Okay.
we are here.
And the main entrance.
Okay,
For
okay.
us.
This is, yeah. And here is the reception hall.
Yes.
And below that is Kennedy. This is what we call main building.
Since we have a little bit of time, I'm going to ask you something where I need your help. I have been asked to do a lot of learning by doing, so learning by exercise, which is good. I like that. I do have a few ideas of exercise in a few specific topics. What I would appreciate is if you have ideas about exercise. No, not necessarily. I mean, it can be exercise we can do here together. Things that illustrate what we're talking about. At the moment, my ideas are mostly in the area of lean budget. I think there's a lot of things to do in terms of exercise about lean budget, and there's also a lot of things to teach and to say about lean budget. It's typically the wrong stuff. Lean budget, yeah. And on the other side, what kind of exercise? I also have quite a few exercises on finance, business. Then I have some simple stuff that I can ask you to do. But
Exercises are like NPV and IRR analysis.
exactly. You know that. Okay, good. So at least someone will know. But I think it's important that you know at least the basics of that. I mean, if you tell me, it means you've seen it before, so you've heard before. But I'm sure your colleagues have not. I mean, on the
I'm just
maybe-
checking, like, it's a good thing to again do.
Sorry?
I mean, I'm just checking if that's what it is. It's a good
That's
thing,
the sort of thing I had in mind, yes, yes.
it will be a good activity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can even show you how to, a trick, it's only a trick, but it's a good illustration of what I personally do in many basic areas of mathematics or things like that. So basically, I mean, for instance, I'm just talking about in trigonometry. I never learned any formula in trigonometry. I'm always remembering the basic stuff, and then I recalculate any formula. I always have the circle, the one circle, and then everything else falls from that. Oh, trigonometry. You start from that. You start from that 1, 1, 1 here, and here, and here. And the only thing you have to know, is that here is the sin, and here is the cos of, let's say, alpha. And then you also have to, kind of know that this amount is alpha in radians. And then everything else goes from there. Everything else. Everything. So, just to illustrate that, basically, in this financial calculation, I will show you a trick to be able to calculate a recursive formula very easily. Very easily. It's much, for me personally, it's much easier if you found the trick once. So that's why I like this idea of exercise, because if you found the trick once yourself, then you know forever, basically.
Yeah.
It's like riding a bike. Once you've been riding a bike once, you never lose that. Or if you ski or whatever, or if you surf or whatever. So that's the sort of thing I wanted to approach with you guys on financial stuff. But apart from these financial calculations and the link budget, where there's a lot of things I think I can get you to do some exercise, some calculations yourself. I don't have lots of ideas of exercise, to be honest. So I'm very open to suggestions. Yeah, maybe I was thinking about solar cells, calculations, sort of things, but it's pretty basic. It's not easy. I mean, I don't find it easy to systematically have exercise for every topic.
Isn't the next class, the exercises that we normally would do after this, aren't they supposed to be
Well,
related?
I asked this question, where do we have the exercise and things like that, and I was told that so far that basically
Normally just after this, like at the 4, whatever.
yeah, no, I mean, what I was told is every teacher does the way he wants in terms of lab works and stuff like that. I had foreseen one on the next, not on the next one, but on the one after that, on the 10th, on the laws of physics, on the space environment, a few exercises on that. But yeah, I mean, it's a call for ideas. If you have ideas on that, I would really appreciate anything you have in mind. On this Moodle stuff, is it Moodle or?
Moodle, yeah, Moodle.
Moodle.
That's what I would ask actually, because I don't know if you have access already, so we could
I
have access to the
don't know if I have access
slides
to that.
and
I mean, these ones, I put them on this memory stick, so.
Oh, then if you don't delete it, then I can.
I give you back the memory stick.
Yes, and I
you
can
already,
share.
You can already.
Maybe you can ask the secretary Marielle Mabi
Marielle,
for the Moodle how to do it.
okay, there's an access for everyone. She mentioned that to me, I think, but I'm not sure. Whether there's a.
Yeah, and
access.
And I think what Michelle was saying right now is because when we received our schedule here, it shows that it's separated in two here. In your case, like here, it shows for us like lectures, and then for the Professor Nicola Faber, it shows here exercise. I think that's what you were saying, right? That like we were not sure if his part was just exercises or if he will also teach.
We had a chat with Nicola. And we came to the conclusion that it was really logical that everyone, teacher, does his exercise.
Okay.
So Nicola is not going to do the exercise for my part.
Oh, okay.
Not gonna do.
That's
So he's going to do his part and his exercise.
Okay.
So I think that's an old version.
Okay.
He's not going to do exercise for one. I mean, for me, it doesn't make sense because.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm having. Lectures and I should be the one who's doing the exercise.
Yeah. Now it's more clear to us, yeah.
No,
it's more clear. Okay.
It didn't make any sense to me. We discussed that. And he's doing. I mean, if I understand correctly, what Nicola is doing is he's going to start FD more in depth, and he's going to have a few exercises on that. And in the next round. Where I'm not, because he's having only a few classes on this semester, and he's having some more in the next one. In the next one, if I understand correctly, but from what I heard, he probably has a software, a tool, for the lack of a better word. I think it's called. It's called CDF. I've heard about that concurrent design facility. I've heard about this stuff some time ago from ISA. I don't know what they've done with that. I've seen a lot of release from that. I mean, I don't know really. I have a feeling it's something like a Microsoft project for design with multiple people who interact in the same design, something like that. Just like you can have different people working on a Word document or on an Excel spreadsheet, something like that. That's what I think. But I've never seen anything of that nature, so I could not comment. But maybe you'll hear in half an hour. I don't know. So for me, next time I'm just asking you if you could have some ideas about exercises you would like to, or you think would be interesting to illustrate this. Can you take the action to? Sorry, it's your.
Stick, yes,
it's your stick. Can you take the action to put that on Moodle or Doodle? Moodle.
On Moodle, I will try.
I think what we can do is that.
Do you have access?
Yes, I don't know how to add it, but I can try.
Yeah, we also have a group that we
yes,
are all
I
in
can
that she
give
can
this
send.
to everyone. It's not
we
a
will all
problem.
have
So
access.
how does it
For
work?
organizational purposes,
That-
it would really be best if it could be put where it belongs.
Yeah.
You will have to ask Marielle to put it. She has the access.
Okay.
As students, we don't have access
She'll
to
be
it.
there.
Yeah.
You don't have access.
No,
We
we
can
have
only-
Are you have?
We can only download, we
Are you-
cannot upload.
We can't upload.
Okay. You can only see what's there.
It's the professors that has the access.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Before
So
that I can share with everyone. It's not a problem. But for the next one, we
You
need.
could probably even email it to her. And and she could.
Oh, that's a good idea. If we can share,
No,
share
but-
email address.
But the idea of the Moodle, it's a platform there, everything is self-contained,
Mm-hmm.
and so we can always go back to that in the future for
Yeah, no,
organizational
you're right.
purposes.
It's designed for that.
Mm.
And in practice, I sense there's two levels of access. One for the teacher, so read only and read write, something like that.
We read only.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I think it's okay.
everyone has their own password, or
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Also for the ideas that you're requesting us, can we have a view at the entire chunk of the syllabus to understand
sure.
what are the ideas that we can think of?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is it in that pen drive or is it that what you upload?
Well, so far in this one, you have all these slides. I will put more all these PowerPoint stuff. I call it the PowerPoint. All what you have here is there. In the first one, you have the list of modules. I will put more. At the moment, I think I put only one more in your memory stick. I think I've just put the next one, which is subsystem. I think I put no applications. Sorry, applications. The applications as well. It's for PowerPoints. Okay. For me, that was all. If you close that, make sure I don't lose it. I will show you my credentials. And also if you project. Device is currently used.
Otherwise, you can shut down the computer, then it will disconnect automatically, and then you can remove it.
You don't have anything that you use and stuff.
See that? There's on off time. I can just give it to them.
Oh, thanks. Tu es luxembourgeois?
Oui.
Tu es le seul luxembourgeois de...
Oui.
Tu es où?
À Colmar-Berg.
Ah, Colmar-Berg. Ah, j'ai vécu à Colmar-Berg. C'est pas loin de Colmar-Berg pendant quelques temps quand je suis venu ici.
Ok.
J'habitais à Bicêtre, je crois. Colmar-Berg. Oui, Colmar-Berg, c'est là que t'as pas un de tes parents qui travaille chez